The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and you will get our starting five shout-outs here shortly. Can always join us. And excited that you do so on Hail Varsity YouTube, across the Hail Varsity Radio Network, and Hail Varsity Radio Twitter at HVarsity Radio. A lot to get into today as Nebraska volleyball survives against Creighton. We'll have a thought or two on that. Mike Babcock going to be with us. Coming up here in about 15 minutes, we'll talk with Babbers from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. And into hour two, Evan Bland joins us from the Omaha World Herald. He's a Hall of Famer. He and his brother, the pride of Auburn, Kelsay boys. Chris Kelsay, part of this 2024 Nebraska Football Hall of Fame induction class. And he'll be honored under the lights at Memorial Stadium Saturday night against Northern Iowa. So we'll check in with Chris Kelsay and then Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic. Jock Doc Wednesday. We'll talk Christian McCaffrey, 489-1240, 489-1240 to get in. And we need to mention and are proud to mention the remembrance of those who served and fought and, of course, were the first responders 23 years ago today with 9/11. The other Brian, proud man with the military, listener with us. Got to see Brian last week at the Single Barrel and also out at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Amen to you, Brian. GBR, hashtag never forget 9/11. So appreciate you, Brian, jumping in and what you do. Grateful Red is in the stream first. Jack is here along with Uncle Jimmy. Mr. Erickson is in as well, the stream. And Mr. Snitley is here. Jeff Snitley, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty. Brent is here, says Dylan has 0 turnovers in 2 games. Sims had 7. Amazing. KG is here. NASCAR Eric is in. James Williams. Maybe that James Williams.
Probably not.
Says, let's go, baby. Is it Saturday yet? The other Dave is in. Says 20th or so. Ryan is here. Ryan, good to have you. He's just here for the kegs and eggs. Ryan, we're going to use some of that just delicious seasoning that you dropped off for us last Friday at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Back there this Friday. Dustin checks in. Says, longtime radio listener. Sometimes live stream participant. Scuba Steve is in. Ronnie is here as well. New in-season Chasing 3 episode coming soon. The other Brian, I hope is that coming out tonight? Is it always a Wednesday drop?
They said coming soon, which is also what they said last week whenever it dropped that night. So with last week, the information in hand, I'd assume it's coming tonight, but all we know right now is coming soon, which I think probably means we're still putting the finishing touches on it. As soon as it's done, we'll release it.
The final directorial cut and green light from one producer extraordinaire, Matt Rule.
Or with my experience on Adobe Audition, that's a free shout out, but we do use it every single day to edit up our videos. Sometimes you're just sitting there and that little progress bar is not moving fast enough for your...
So it's a juice issue.
You never know. Sometimes it's like, man, this processing power of my computer is struggling on this video, and it says it's going to take us 90 minutes to export. Let's hope it's quicker. Let's hope it's not longer. You never know with video editing. But based on what we saw last week, I'm crossing my fingers for tonight because I said it on the postgame show. I'll say it again. I need that episode of Chasing 3 like a fish needs water.
Yep. Ronnie is in. How's everyone's day? We're hanging in, Ronnie. Brent is here. Brent says, Northern Iowa has some big backs, 230, 225, 221. Yes, they do. Time to tackle, get low. Scott is here. Dion, good to have you, bud. Moonbot says, howdy, nerds. Good to have Moonbot in. Jason says, what's up? Elijah, the other Elijah, says, howdy, howdy from Dallas, Fort Worth. Brian is here. Moving on, the Panthers. So he says 63-3. He's already given us a score. Fly too low. Says the Northern Iowa page on TikTok I found is very confident they'll shock the nation. Cliff here from Florida. Rich, good to have you. Jeff is in. So all good. I see Babbers in the green room. That's encouraging. I love that. 6.3 million viewers. Great column by Mitch Sherman from The Athletic about Nebraska and the cool factor we touched on yesterday. And some questions and love and comments in the old Stuart Mandel college football mailbag with The Athletic. We'll get to those in a couple of minutes. But I want to start off with an email, Elijah. This is from Grant. Grant, appreciate you tuning in and taking time to email us. So this was from the Colorado game Saturday night. This is what Grant witnessed. And Grant flew all the way in from San Francisco to watch the game with his dad. So he's like, look, after attending the game, a portion of the fans decided to rush the field. My dad and I stayed in our seats to take it all in. While sitting there, I noticed a woman, likely in her mid-60s, walking towards the field, holding a Ziploc bag. So for some reason, this caught my attention, so I just kind of kept watching her. Then when she reached the sideline near the southwest end of the field, near the end zone, she sprinkled something from the bag and then kissed it with tears in her eyes. She was immediately embraced by a younger woman. I assume it was her daughter. It seemed likely that the remains of a father or brother or son or sibling had been spread on the field after Nebraska's win, maybe against the biggest rival. I wanted to share this moment I witnessed because I feel it's a powerful example of how deeply Nebraska football impacts people across our great state. P.S. I had 3 February hot dogs while in the stadium, so I scratched that itch. Way to be, Grant. Three Fairberries, brother.
I love that little note at the end.
That's for every offensive touchdown scored. Way to be. But no, I mean, I have not ever witnessed it. I don't know, and I don't want to go weird or morbid here, but I just don't know how many loved ones' ashes are truly have been dumped on the field before. I mean, it's more than a lifestyle. It's really just a way of families coming together for decades. So that's my memory. That's my smile. Especially this time of year when I think of my dad, is all the years we army crawled pre-renovation of West Stadium up to the West Balcony, right by that original Jumbotron. Yeah, great memories, great times. So, and good for this woman. I don't know how legal it was, but I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter, and it's.
I don't think anyone would go out and prosecute her for that.
I don't.
Because everyone has that person in their life that would want to be spread at Memorial Stadium, or at least a part of them.
Yes, you do, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I mean, you hear it every single Saturday in the song, "There is no place like Nebraska." That's the living embodiment of that. Sure. You know what? The greatest fans in college football are from around here. There is no place like Nebraska, and there is no one like Nebraskans with how much they care about Husker football. That just completely embodies that point of, yeah, there is something special around here. And, man, what a great way to go out. If that is where your final resting place is on the field at Memorial Stadium after one of the biggest wins in the program in the past
decade. You've been waiting on forever.
The one you've been waiting on, the one you couldn't see yourself, to be able to be a part of that moment and to be on the field. That's special.
No, and that's cool. I'm glad that was shared from Grant. Well, do you know anybody who's pulled that off?
No.
I don't either. I don't know anybody who's got Uncle Cletus that said, I want my ashes spread at Memorial Stadium. And, it happened.
Well, I mean, there was the talk this offseason from Dannon of having some sort of memorial place.
Like mausoleum thing.
Yeah. A Memorial Stadium. I mean, it's
I pray that there's
thing.
not a seat licensing expense with it. Annual rent.
If I'm laid to rest permanently at Memorial Stadium, I hope my family members that are living on beyond me get a discount for that, you know?
We'll see. But Big Red Junkies are in. They say, forget about it, in the soprano voice. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. What Grant shared with us in that story. AZ Husker is in. Greg checks in, just landed at Epley. And the Avis saw my Nebraska hat, and I got upgraded. They upgraded me to a red pickup. Ha! Good to be home. Good to be in Nebraska. Good to have you back in Nebraska, Greg. That's pretty cool. Arlo is in. Okay, so KG is going here. He says, not to be a jerk, but imagine if your last wish was to have your ashes scattered after Nebraska beats a Power 4, in parentheses 5 team at home. How long would she have had to wait? Because it had been a while. Because you couldn't have people in the stadium really with Penn State.
Mm-mm. You had to have beaten a Power 5 team somewhere.
And the Babbers will pull that up for us. Jim is in. Jim, glad to be back. Thanks for the shout-out for Dad yesterday. Dad's birthday was yesterday. Family appreciated it. Jim, we appreciate you and your fam. That's pretty awesome. So let's talk Stuart Mandel for a minute. And Stuart got an email, or I should say a mailbag question from Andrew. So the question is this from Andrew: how close is Nebraska to being back? And I think we're all fair about pumping brakes. I think we're all pretty fair about wanting to see this team against Northern Iowa. Do they come out and dominate like they're supposed to? I think Illinois is going to be a good ball game. Probably a 7 to 10 point spread, maybe 13.5. Don't know yet.
That even feels high.
That feels a little high. We don't know where Nebraska is going to be at injury-wise after Saturday, going into Saturday. You might see some new faces on the offensive line this week. And you also have Rutgers looming. You have Purdue. That, I don't know, man. The way Notre Dame's reeling. Does Purdue Pete shock the Irish at home? The Irish got to travel to West Lafayette. That's a bit of a rivalry.
I mean, if you're Purdue, I bet you wish they would have escaped by the skin of their teeth yesterday.
I mean, that line's only 10.5 with Purdue being dogged at home.
Yeah, but I'd look at that and go, oh, man, we're going to get a pissed off Notre Dame team.
Either that or you're going to get a wrecked Notre Dame team. you just get in line and go to town. But, yeah, Stewart was like, okay, breakthrough moment. Yeah, you beat somebody. You dominated somebody. And it went the way you wanted it to go. You blow somebody out opposed to putting yourself in position to lose a close ball game. So you didn't wilt under the spotlight. You, quite frankly, thrived in the spotlight. You came out and owned it, which is great. You've got a transformative player, and we'll hear from Mahomes here a little bit later, his thoughts on Raiola. But you've got that quarterback now. I think what's fair, and Stewart wrote this, and we talked a little bit about this on the Average Joe pod, where, okay, we know this. We know Michigan's a far cry from what they were a year ago. Will they get better? You think. Right? Will their quarterback play get better? You think it will.
And you also lack a little bit of context. They aren't the team they were last year.
No, because
you call it a far
NFL.
cry. We don't know how far a cry it is, though, because I think that Texas team they just lost to is a damn good football team.
Yeah, Texas is good. Oregon, and I think Boise's good. Boise's probably playoff good.
I mean, they have a Heisman contender at running back.
Yes, so Boise's going to scare a lot of people, and they coulda, shoulda, woulda at Oregon. Oregon's looked uninterested the first 2 weeks. Okay, so do they get better? Do they get whipped into shape by week 3, or are they just kind of living off last year? Don't know that. But if Michigan and Oregon stay shaky, those are two teams you had second and fourth or fifth in the Big Ten going in. What's Nebraska do? What's Rutgers do? What's Illinois do? What's Iowa do? What's Wisconsin up to? I think it's pretty clear to say, okay, Ohio State and Penn State are you got Ohio State, then you have Penn State, and SC looks pretty darn talented. So there's your 3. From a Nebraska standpoint, do you climb up if Michigan and Oregon aren't as good as we thought they were. And maybe we've undersold Nebraska. We don't know. We know that Nebraska's better. We know that Nebraska's super talented on defense. We know Nebraska's better on offense, better at with Mazuka, better with Raiola, better at wide receiver catching the football. We'll see if they get better at downfield blocking. And Nebraska's got 4 guys they like at running back now that's been pared down to 2. And if you can get Dowdell going, he's a great combo of power and speed. I mean, he's a guy that can go get you 1,200 yards this season. And then you mix in some Ramir time, and I still like Gabe, and I still like Emmett as well. So, no, I think Nebraska has room in this Big Ten if they handle business Saturday and beyond to keep climbing. We'll know more about Nebraska, and it's not Nebraska's fault. I don't see Colorado. I said there's a shot. We go back and listen to the tape. I rarely shout out myself. I think there's a real shot. Colorado's 2-10 this year. That's not a shot at Nebraska for beating a, air quote, bad football team, but Colorado looks like a bad football team. They're an explosive and dangerous football team, but they're not a disciplined football team or a balanced football team. So I don't know where Colorado ends up. I just know it's a real hurdle Nebraska had to get over. They did it. And now, again, as the old saying goes, what's next? We'll find out this September. Mike Babcock going to weigh in with Hail Varsity next. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you Wednesday edition. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Got a call off air. Lovely listener said her loved one, had his ashes spread at Memorial Stadium. And Babbers, not to get too weird or morbid, but we had a pretty interesting email from Grant to open the show about him witnessing somebody spreading a loved one's ashes after the Colorado game. You ever see or hear anything of that, or is that, oh yeah, that's happened 100 times I've heard about?
No, that's the first time I've heard anything about that. I was listening to what you said, and no, I'd never heard anything like that before.
Didn't know if, oh yeah, so and so, yeah. So I didn't know. I just had to bring you in on it. So how you doing, Babs? Big one on Saturday.
Okay.
Big one on Saturday.
Yeah, it was. Now you just have to go one game at a time and be focused on Northern Iowa.
That's right.
Not look down the line to the Fighting Illini or Purdue, Rutgers. It's Northern Iowa up next. That's the focus. And that, you guys mentioned Colorado could be 2-10. I think Colorado's probably a little better than that.
Schmidt said 2-10.
I said 2-10 in August.
Okay. I think Colorado is going to be better than that. I think that the Nebraska game probably was enough of a shocker to get the focus a little bit better than it was.
I kind of agree with what Matt Rule said on Monday, that Nebraska was pretty uniquely built to absolutely demolish what that Colorado team was. Just with the strength along the lines of scrimmage. You have a lot of great running attacks within the Big Ten, which I think if you're Colorado worries you, but I don't think they're going to be as futile along the offensive line for all their games this year. I said before the season that I thought they had enough talent to be a bowl team. The question was mentality between the ears with that Colorado team. I still feel the same way. I just have probably even more question marks about their mentality and some of the off-the-field stuff as opposed to the on-the-field talent. Because I still think from an on-the-field talent point of view, everywhere except their offensive line, they're probably good enough to be a bowling team, but offensive line's massive.
Well, it is. They're dinged up, and Babbers, I mean, there's drama around the program, right? It is a reality show. You've got the persona of Prime, and you've got pros on that team. You do. And at what point are you going to keep getting killed over the middle, or are you just going to say, peace, I'm getting ready for the NFL Combine? I mean, I think that's a reality.
Yeah, you're right. And And the one thing the Nebraska game does is gives Colorado's opponents video to watch and understand how to approach things. I mean, that Nebraska approached it very well, and even though there was a scoreless second half, Satterfield said that the 9 penalties that Nebraska had in the second half, and I questioned some of those, took away 176 yards of offense and a touchdown. I mean, can you imagine that?
35-10 with 300 rushing yards. You're feeling a little bit better this week.
Yeah, it's incredible what the penalties erased, and you figure that Nebraska was a little more conservative in the second half because you had that lead, and you wanted to not do anything foolish. So that was pretty remarkable, I thought. But again, I think that Colorado's maybe a little better than 2-10, but I thought Colorado was better than that last year, and look what happened. So we'll see. We'll see if they can get it together, or if it's just let's wait for the NFL draft.
It's Mike Babcock with us here, his usual Wednesday segment with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, coming out of that game and after what you saw against UTEP, what remain your big questions for this team? We've had this discussion earlier in the week. People have said kicking. I tend to agree with that one. Any other, I guess, question marks that come to you regarding this football team through the first 2 games of the season?
Well, no, the special teams to kicking is obviously an issue, and Matt Rule acknowledged that. He also said that Ed Foley was the guy to get things resolved there. And you have Alvano coming off an injury, so when he gets 100% healthy and gets some confidence, maybe that's going to be resolved. But I still think it's a process. I think it's a week by week process. I don't think that Nebraska beat Colorado, which everybody expected UTEP. It was a little less certain, I guess, Colorado. You just have to get better every week. I agree with Rule on that. And, your execution has to get better. The physicality is there. He said that. That was important. And 2 games in, you've got an advantage in turnovers, which is important, I think, obviously, based on what happened last year. So can you continue that? Don't turn the ball over, finish ahead in turnovers, be physical, continue to be physical. I think they can do that, and then execute. And I think that there's time to work on that.
Mike, do you look at Saturday as really being a precursor? And I know from a style standpoint, it's going to be big backs and power football from Northern Iowa. I don't know what is apples to apples, if at all, with Northern Iowa, and then there's Illinois, and then you got Rutgers. But my question is this: do you worry about Nebraska with their depth, their experience, and their talent being as fierce as they were a year ago against the run? We haven't had to see them stop the run the first 2 weeks. I'm not worried about them doing it Saturday, but I'm saying the accumulation of some of these opponents. I mean, it's going to be some black and blue Saturdays stacked on top of one another.
Well, yeah, and I think Nebraska is capable of dealing with that. And I think, that's why I think Northern Iowa is a good way to fade into Big Ten play, or whatever the verb is you want to use there, because of the way it plays, because it is a run-oriented team, because it has big backs, because it has an offensive line that I think all but one of the offensive linemen are at least 300 pounds. A couple of them are 329. And no, I don't think they're going to run over Nebraska, but I think it's a good preparation for what Nebraska is going to deal with when it gets into Big Ten play. So from that standpoint, it's going to be a good test. Now, do I think it's going to be a close game? I don't think it will be. But, again, it's going to be a physical game. Nebraska's going to be able to run the ball and make the pass plays. We know that Royal has that capability. Don't turn it over, and get better each week.
It's Mike Babcock with us here. And Mike, whenever you see a team that likes to run the ball on this schedule, I have confidence because of what we saw from this Husker defense last year. That was their strength, stopping the run in pretty much every single game except Michigan last year. Whenever teams wanted to run the ball against Nebraska, Nebraska's defense tended to have success, and that held true through the first 2 games of the season. I don't think UTEP or Colorado, either of them wanted to come out and run the ball for 200 yards against Nebraska. But that being said, neither really had success on the ground against that Nebraska defense that came out most plays expecting the pass. With that in mind, do you have confidence that this Husker defense is going to continue their success against the run like we saw last season?
Yeah, I do. I believe that they have a solid run defense. And again, that's why I think that this is Northern Iowa will be an opportunity against an FCS team, obviously, to show what kind of a run defense Nebraska has. It's not one of the best that the FCS has is not going to be able to run the ball against Nebraska on a consistent basis. I don't think so, because I think that's the kind of run defense Nebraska has.
Babbers, before we get you out, a couple of questions left. I need to know what's coming up from you with the newsletter, and you can subscribe to Mike Babcock's newsletter with Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Mike B. at hurrdatsports.com. Get him an email, and you'll get on the list for these bi-weekly newsletters. After the newsletter, I thought on Chris Kelsay. He's coming up in less than an hour. He's part of the Nebraska class of 2024 Hall of Fame. A thought on Kelsay's induction.
Very deserving, very good. Both the Kelsays were outstanding players, and it's a well-deserved honor. Maybe a little long time in coming, but happy to see that he's one of those that's included in that class because of his ability and the way he played.
Mike, for those listeners out there like me, where the Kelsay brothers are like, that's the earliest Husker memories I have, if I even have memories of their playing days at Nebraska. How do you define how the Kelsay brothers played? I mean, from small-town Nebraska, Auburn, to the big city Lincoln, they're just names that kind of get thrown around as guys that represent that black shirt mantra. How do you define how they played, in crisp in particular?
They played the right way. They played the way they were supposed to. They were disciplined. They were physical. And they were high character guys. Can't emphasize that enough. But that's the way they were. They were very down to earth, very cordial type. I remember being on the road once. Can't remember what game it was. Going out to eat with my wife, and the Kelsay family was there at the same restaurant that we were, and I think it was Chris. Came over and said hi. I mean, that says a lot, I think, about the kind of person that he was, and that his brother was the same way.
Babbers, real quick, what's coming up with the newsletter?
Just some things pulled out from the news conferences on Monday and Tuesday as you look ahead to the Northern Iowa game. I don't look beyond that. I don't think that you can do that. Just bits and pieces, thoughts.
All right. Can't wait for it. Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity, Hurrdat Sports, at MD Babs. Follow on Twitter. Babbers, we'll see you Saturday night, partner.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yep, we'll see you then.
Appreciate you. There he is, Mike Babcock. And I didn't ask him. He's wearing a purple shirt. I don't know if that was a Grateful Dead purple or it was just Purple Wednesday.
I think he said he was all out of tie-dye whenever we talked to him. Was that 2 weeks ago?
You know what we're going to do? Are some of those stores still open around Lincoln where you'd get the Grateful Dead shirts?
No, there's no weed shops in Lincoln.
Well, I know. I know that. But the places you could go and get your hacky sack is what I'm saying.
Yeah, weed stores.
All right. Well, dive in. What'd Mahomes say about Raiola?
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Tiger Shark Diver is in. Asking about the Fighting Bert Bielemas. The Fighting Berts is a good name. I kind of like the pig farmers. Uncle Larry's here. Good to have you in, Uncle Larry. More comments in the stream. Great Red Shark says Jacory's stat sheet has placed a hex on yellow flags. That'd be nice if you're a Nebraska fan to see, some of those yards from scrimmage numbers stand up if you're Nebraska football when Jacory Barney takes the football. We're talking about Nebraska v. Northern Iowa a little bit. We'll get more insight from Evan Bland here at 5 o'clock. Chris Kelsay, new member of the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame at 5:25. Anxious to see Nebraska come out, like we touched on yesterday, play like a big dog and handle business. But I also, this team has areas to get better at, and one of those is the perimeter blocking. Can we pull that up from Sat yesterday? Because that is a very fair point to nitpick at. You've got guys in Nayor and Banks, and I'll say this, Fidoni's murdered whoever he's been blocking, not only in the kind of the wham block on some of those run plays, but I have no complaint with his blocking. But as far as trying to get those short yardage, those first down throws, those little bubbles, positive, Elijah. They've been your 50-50. And it's not been 2nd and 6, 2nd and 4. At least it wasn't against Colorado. The Colorado secondary is better. But a lot of times it was 2nd and 12. Non-penalty, 2nd and 12, because you've had more than on one occasion, whoever's out, split out, not doing their job downfield. Here's Sat yesterday.
I think that's just a result of our perimeter blocking. Like we're not very good at perimeter blocking right now, and we have to clean that up, and we have to improve this week, next week, the next week. Like we're going to need to get the ball in the perimeter to win games this season, and to have the big wideouts that we have. That has to be a strong suit for us, and it's not right now. And it's not just the wideouts; it's the running backs, it's the offensive line on screens. Like when we get the ball in the perimeter, we have to improve and be able to take advantage of that.
Totally agree. And can they do it? It's a you hear coaches say this, can't do it, won't do it. Is it a can't do it thing where, all right, Banks and Nayor are dudes that are going to catch the football, they're not blockers? Well, you're going to need to be able to block. And I'm not just singling those two out, but those two guys with their size need to set the edge, or whoever is in, need to set the edge better.
I mean, shout out to our friends, no block, no rock. It's a mantra for a reason. Uh-huh. If you're a wideout, if you ain't blocking, you shouldn't be getting the rock. But what I'll say is I kind of asked this question to Mike about biggest concern. As when I look on the offensive side of the ball, it might be the pass catchers through the first 2 games of the season. I was watching that film breakdown with Aaron Murray yesterday, the former Georgia NFL quarterback, and he had back-to-back weeks, UTEP and Colorado, where he wasn't all that impressed with the play of the wide receivers. We see it on the perimeter blocking. It hasn't been great. As he dives in and looks at their routes, some of them he goes, taking the wrong angle out of this cut. You're not deep enough on this crossing route. Some details. 5 little detail things. There was one that stood out to me. He didn't mention it, but that wheel route to Fidoni up the corner that was just out of the reach of Fidoni. If you watch it before the ball's released by Raiola, Fidoni pulls up just a little bit. He slows down halfway through the route because I don't think he thinks the ball is coming to him. He looks back and here comes the ball and he hits that top gear again. And it's a little thing where you go, that might be worth that half yard to a yard, and that turns an incompletion into a touchdown. You get the pass interference, the bailout called, luckily. But no, I'm kind of with Murray in that. I look at the Husker wide receivers, and they've been the biggest question mark to me through the first 2 games of this offense, just in terms of effort on perimeter blocking. I mean, I think Raio's made them look good at times. There's been times they look good, but there's little moments where you go, I mean, I know he's technically a running back, but Ramir Johnson said at postgame he took the wrong angle on that route that could have been a pick by that Colorado linebacker that he ends up taking into the end zone. He went too deep on that route, and he gave the Colorado linebacker a play on it where people are going to look at Raiola and say, oh, that's not a great throw by Raiola, but Ramir Johnson's going to raise his hand up and say, hey, if I did better, it looked like a good throw.
Yeah. Well, and even on this was a play you brought up, the 4th down against UTEP, where they were over the middle to Nayor on a crosser, and it's complete, But it's turnover on downs because you're not even to the sticks.
On, what was that, 4th and 3 or 4th and 4?
Yeah, because Naylor's going to win that route all the time. His speed's great. He had the incredible touchdown catch and opener. But, yeah, there's some work to do. How about Patty Mahomes? Press conference day for the Chiefs, and was asked about Dylan Raiola. And Mahomes on Raiola looking up to him.
I mean, it's cool, honestly. I mean, I was that guy. I grew up watching players. I remember when I would grow up, I loved Alex Rodriguez, played shortstop, and would try to make plays just like him and do stuff like that. And it helped me become the athlete that I am. And so it's just telling me I'm getting a little old. I think that's the biggest thing is that you have these guys that are coming up and doing some of the sidearm stuff and everything like that. But I know Dylan. I trained with him in the off seasons. Great kid, a great football player, and I think he's going to make his own stamp on the game, and I think you've seen that early in his career.
So, kind words. Nebraska fans loving that on social media. A little bit more from Mahomes here on Raiola and the topic of being a team guy.
I don't know if whenever you come in as a freshman, you want to be on Twitter and be the part of the team. I think he wants it to be about his team, and I think that's the right way to play the quarterback position is that it's not about you. It's about going out there and having success as a team, and they've done that so far this year. So even though I think he just kind of wants to push us out and play football and go out there and win football games, I think that's the right way to play the position.
Back to the wide receivers, and a guy that is third on the depth charts, Malachi Coleman. Malachi is a burner. He is a physical talent. He's also a dude that can beat the hell out of people downfield. I mean, you wonder what his emergence could be like this year if it's not, a redshirt situation, and we're super early into the year to even be talking redshirt, a guy that's going into his second season after seeing some important snaps a year ago. But Malachi's a dude that can really help with that perimeter blocking.
Yeah, and we talked about on our boat shows, Pat chimes in here on the stream saying he watched the same videos, doesn't think the wide receivers are running very hard in some of their routes. You see that from Banks at times. He's sure-handed, but routes aren't there. Like, we asked the question on the boat show, though, back in
pre-football.
Yeah, late July. Was that early August? Asking the boat show. Asking the question, like, how does Malachi differentiate himself from the wide receiver room? Because I didn't know. This is a way you can differentiate yourself. If the wide receivers on the field aren't blocking well on the perimeter, go out there and make that your full effort. Don't care about being a pass catcher. Don't care about your physical gifts that allow you to go deep and catching jump balls. That could be a way he gets himself on the field and differentiates himself as a playmaker, is by doing it in the running game. Because I think he's gifted enough athletically that he can be a pass catcher, but how do you get yourself on the field? The one thing Nebraska's wide receiver room lacks right now completely is guys that are good at downfield blocking on the perimeter. That could be a way that he differentiates himself and gets himself onto the field. Because I asked that question. What is he going to do that differentiates himself from other guys in the room? Because there's a lot of guys that can do the same things that Malachi does in this room now. If you can find a way to be a perimeter blocker, that's one way.
We'll check in with Evan Bland, Chris Kelsay coming up. We'll wind down this first hour, 489-1240, 800-825-5865. Want to chime in on the Hail Varsity Network. I can also keep these comments coming in the stream. Always like and subscribe. Hail Varsity, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for the podcast. Hour 2 on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Get to the phones here in a moment. A reminder to get buckled up. Coaches make substitutions during the game to get the best on the field. Getting behind the wheel after drinking also demands a substitution. Impaired driving is deceptively dangerous. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Who's on the horn?
We go to Pete.
Pete, 3 in a row, brother. How we doing?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. What do you know?
I was just doing some paperwork here and thinking, you've got one of the best coaches for wide receiver perimeter blocking in college football, and Ron Brown. Maybe they need to switch him over to the wide receivers because for years NFL coaches come into Nebraska and they would study how he was teaching perimeter blocking with our receivers. So maybe Ron Brown needs to get involved a little bit.
Well, Ron, thankfully, and Pete, thanks for the phone call. Ron is able to be on field now. And you know what? He has done great work at wide receiver / tight end in his career and also at running back. And I think that's a set of eyes I'd be tapping into, and I'm sure Nebraska is.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's making a switch in terms of who's coaching it, but we've talked about the fact that Garrett McGuire is a young coach that needs experience and needs people like that in his corner to get him coached up as a coach. So maybe not kick Garrett McGuire to the side during perimeter blocking lessons, and say, oh, this is Ron Brown's time, but having Ron Brown in your corner, that's a great resource to have if you're Garrett McGuire regarding the perimeter blocking. Go tap into his wealth of knowledge, bring him onto the field. I don't think you kick Garrett McGuire to the side by any means, but it's a great opportunity for Garrett McGuire to get himself coached up in a coaching aspect.
Travis Hunter had a word about Nebraska, that experience.
1 second, this computer sucks.
We're going to break down the game, Nebraska game. They came out fast. They hit us in the mouth. We had no response. That's pretty much what happened. And Nebraska's a good team. They beat us fair and square. And we just got to come out and do better. We got to play Colorado football, and that's not Colorado football.
No discredit to the team. Good team. They played good ball. But I want to give more credit to their fan base and the way they got their stadium set up. They give you hell from the time you step foot out your locker room to the time you get to the field.
That environment was top 10.
Yeah, I got to give it to them.
The little light show in the fourth quarter, that was cool too. I ain't even gonna lie, that was a good little show, boy. That fans was loud on third down when you break the huddle, when you get in the huddle. I can't even think to myself how loud it was. Yeah, shout out to Nebraska.
So that's cool to have your opponent giving you props. If I'm Coach Prime, dude, and I'm not Coach Prime, I don't know that I want my dudes on a podcast less than a week later talking about how cool our opponent was and, just be silent and go to work on the field. I know it's a different setup in Colorado. It's about branding and different era. I get all that, but yeah, if I'm a diehard football fan, the last thing I want, it's one thing to give, all right, Team Maldus, congrats, they kicked our butt. Fair enough. But to go multimedia with it, I would be putting the podcast on hold and working on my game, even though Travis went for 10 for 110.
That's the Hollywood nature, though. And I was critical of Travis Hunter on Twitter. I think he's a phenomenal player. I want to lay that out there. I have a bigger problem. Do you hear what Shadur said on his podcast this week? I have
not subscribed to Shadur's podcast.
He was asked about his post-game comments, like, were you being critical of your team? He said, no. That comment that I made about that throw being a rookie mistake, that was about me. I made a rookie mistake, and he glossed over the comment he made about his offensive line, which strikes me as completely unself-aware.
Yeah, well, Evan Bland, always aware. He's up next with Hail Varsity.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find us on YouTube, Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter. Subscribe there at HVarsity Radio. Elijah Herbel at Herbal Essence, at Schmidt_radio for me. Chris Schmidt, Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter. You can read him, omaha.com. Evan, 2-0, ranked. The Buffs got buffaloed. And here comes Northern Iowa, man. What's your juice, your excitement here for this Saturday?
Well, it's different than it would be if Nebraska was 1-1. I would say that. If they had lost that game last week, I think it'd be kind of flat, kind of, disappointing, hard to get going. But as it is, technically it's a ranked game between two top 25 teams at different levels, and I think Nebraska had enough to work on still from that opener to where, or from last week's game to where you think, how are they going to look on special teams? How will the penalty situation look? Are they going to be crisp on third down? How about the defense against the run? There's a lot of things, even in victory, where I think you can have some fascination in looking at how Nebraska bounces back or improves, takes that next step, and it's a whole lot more pleasant to try to fix some things and get better after a win than after a loss. It's under the lights, which adds a little bit more pizzazz, I suppose, to this matchup as well. And I think it's a good preview of what they're going to see in the Big Ten, especially defensively trying to stop the run and what UNI wants to do. So I think there's still a lot of interesting things in play, even if the outcome maybe isn't.
Evan Bland with us. And Evan, I want to preface this by saying this isn't a diss. I respect it. But calling Nebraska against Northern Iowa a matchup between two ranked top 25 teams, that's a sell job that a politician would be proud of. Good job to you, sir.
Hey, technically it's true. I mean, at different levels, sure, of course. We all know what we're talking about here. But anything you can do to get their attention and be serious and take a game like this seriously, I think can go a long way in that. And, again, trying to switch up defensively from a spread offense like they saw against UTEP and like they saw against Colorado to what they're going to see this week is going to pay dividends when you're facing Illinois on a Friday night, when you're seeing Rutgers, maybe a little bit with Purdue. So, there's some fascinations here, again, even if this thing's maybe not going to come down to the fourth quarter.
Evan, let's dive into some of those fixes. And if you're betting on, what is fixed week 2 to week 3, is it going to be perimeter blocking? Is it going to be special teams? Both those things were called out. Tony White says we're still the worst defense. It's Tuesday, going back to his presser. But of the two, is it special teams or perimeter blocking that you think looks better this Saturday night and moving forward? What gets fixed first?
I would say of those two, perimeter blocking. A lot of that's been a mindset. You hear from Jamal Banks this week and guys like Jalen Lloyd. And I think they took that to heart about this. And they kind of said as much, like it wasn't so much a technique issue as it was a mindset issue, and just knowing that you're going to, beat your guy on the other side. And maybe, to call back a previous coaching staff, the old no block, no rock line, like this is kind of where that comes in. And, you have electric playmakers like Ja'Cory Barney, like Jalen Lloyd, like Ramir Johnson, who can bust those plays if they have a clear path. And so I think that's most likely to get shored up. Certainly the penalties, I think, will improve. That kind of felt like maybe an outlier for a number of reasons and circumstances from that Colorado game. The special teams thing, to me, may linger a little bit, especially the kicking game. Like you don't feel confident that Nebraska is going to line up even from 30 yards out and be able to make a field goal. And it hasn't been an issue so far in terms of the outcome of the game because Nebraska's been up by so much. But at some point, it's going to be. Maybe that's against Illinois. Maybe that's Rutgers down the line. Maybe it's somewhere else. But, I still think Nebraska is going to be in for a good number of close games this year where field position is going to matter, where the right blocks are going to matter, where getting home on the quarterback is going to matter, and making field goals is going to matter. And so that's just one area where I don't know that you can scheme it up. It's you either execute it or you don't, and it's ultimately up to the players that are out there to do that. So maybe this is a week where some of that confidence gets built up and Nebraska is in a position to hit a couple and do it in front of a full house, and that can pay dividends down the road. I don't think that's as simple as flipping a switch mentally. I think maybe there's going to be a little more work, a little more confidence and mentality sort of stuff that's going to have to go into improving that part.
It's Evan Bland with us here, the Omaha World Herald, his usual Wednesday segment on Hail Varsity Radio, talking a little Nebraska-Colorado, on to Nebraska-Northern Iowa. And Evan, as you look at this game, ask the same question to Mike, ask the same question to you. What are you watching for in terms of things you want to see improved in a game that you should be able to go out there and handily win? What do you want to see improved from the past 2 weeks?
Well, I think you want to see improved what didn't go well against Colorado, and it's kind of what we talked about. I think you need to see cleaner football. I think you need to see some good execution offensively on third downs. I think you need to be clean in special teams, and kicking field goals is just part of that. But, locking things down on kickoffs, being able to flip the field if you have to punt, stopping the other team from a big return. So I think you should have the talent edge. You should have the speed and size and all that to win the game. But I think what I took away from the Colorado game, and when you heard players talk afterwards, like they didn't revel necessarily in beating Colorado. They reveled in coming close to their standard for a lot of the game. And I think that's kind of what separates this team from some past Nebraska teams, is they're so internally motivated to pursue excellence rather than to pursue some external goal of some kind. In last week's case, beating Colorado, that it strikes me that they're going to be really motivated just for their own sakes, and just to put stuff on film and to show that they can do it and take a step forward. So I think those areas in particular, perimeter blocking, like we talked about, you want to have that to be shored up. And then I think you want to continue to do well what you have done well to this point. I mean, you want to see the black shirts continue to dominate. I think if they allow more than 10 points, you'd probably be surprised based on how they've started and the opponent that they're facing. And, offensively, maybe you want to see some of those skill players that have come close to popping a big one doing it. Maybe Ja'Cory Barney finally does one when there's not a penalty involved, or Ramir Johnson busts loose, or whatever it might be. So I think continuing the things that we've seen Nebraska do well, seeing them do that against an FCS opponent, and then seeing the things that maybe haven't gone so well. If you're ever going to have a chance to shore that up, this needs to be the week that you show you can do it.
Evan Bland with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Evan with the Omaha World Herald, at Evan Bland, OWH. What's Nebraska have in Dowdell?
Well, they have a guy who is a little bit more of a bruiser than I think the other running backs in the room as it's currently constructed. I mean, they have a guy who, as we saw last week, can run through defenders in addition to running around a good number of them. And, I do think the running back room is actually pretty deep this year. Like the preseason conversation was often, well, if you have 4 co-1s, then maybe you don't have anybody. But I do think they have guys with varying skill sets, and Dowdell has been the guy that they trust in these 3rd and shorts, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, maybe on the early down if they know they're going to pound it between the tackles. I think you just look at their backgrounds, and he's a guy who was the most heralded out of high school as a recruit, obviously transferring over from Oregon. I mean, he was a 4-star kid who has the frame, has the speed, has the strength. So I think, he's maybe the most physically gifted of the group that's out there right now, certainly the biggest. And I think that skill set's going to be becoming even more in handy once you get into the Big Ten, and you really are going to have to grind out some short yardage situations and conversions. And I think, we saw that first flash in the spring game of what he can be, both in short yardage and as a home run type of hitter. And I think that confidence has just gone up in him and from those around him after 2 games.
Evan, whenever we had Mitch Sherman on our show yesterday, he said he thinks Nebraska has found their workhorse in Dante Dowdell moving forward. Did you agree with that statement?
I think he's probably the most equipped to handle it. Yeah, I mean, Ramir Johnson has been, again, kind of that explosive playmaking type threat. I don't know that he's someone you want to hand the ball off to 20 times just because of his frame and what his game is. Gabe Ervin maybe could be that guy, but we don't know. He's been hurt multiple times now in his college career, unfortunately. Emmett Johnson maybe someday also could be that guy, but I think he's a little slighter of build. So if anyone's going to do it, I think Dowdell's the most physically equipped for it. He's also, the youngest guy in that group in terms of eligibility. And I think maybe what we're not appreciating enough about him is you think back to the spring and when he arrived, I mean, coaches went out of their way many times to say how young he was and how much he had to learn. They really tried to maybe downplay his immediate impact because they wanted to give him time to adapt and settle in at Nebraska as a regular contributor. And he's come out and responded really well. I mean, earned the carries that he got in the opener, bigger share last week, and maybe this is a week again where, when facing a UNI defense that's going to invite long drives, maybe this is another week where he shows what he can do in the middle.
Evan, going to ask you a Big Ten picture. What do you believe about Oregon and Michigan right now?
Well, I believe the shine's off on both of those schools a little bit. Michigan more than Oregon. That Michigan game, I think Texas really showed them that, the Wolverines aren't in that top tier this year. I think it's pretty clear cut. That top 3 or 4 in college football right now, and Michigan, is probably fighting in that next tier nationally and then that next tier in the Big Ten. Oregon, we'll see. 2 games where the defense really struggled against Idaho and then Boise State last week. I'll be curious to see how Oregon State hangs with them this time around. So the Ducks facing a power opponent. I still think that's a team maybe that could find its footing and get going, and maybe ultimately the close games to start become a footnote in their season. But I think you do need to see a little bit more defensively from the Ducks to keep them in that conversation as Big Ten favorites like they were all the way through August.
Bigger concern right now for Nebraska's future schedule, Illinois or Rutgers?
I think it's Illinois for me right now. If things go right, they could be a ranked team next week, coming to Memorial Stadium on a Friday. Weird things can happen on those Friday night games. And you saw just what they did to Kansas. I thought that was a really impressive win that they had. Rutgers, I think we're still kind of figuring out maybe what they are, who they are. Very similar team to Nebraska in a lot of ways, really physical defense, probably a better running back, but their quarterback's not as good as what Nebraska has. That'll be a close game as well, but I think just from what I've seen in the schedule these last couple of weeks, to me, what Illinois did against Kansas was pretty eye-opening. And Illinois is also one of those teams that's, even when they're not super talented, they are just, they're going to hit you hard. Teams tend to come out of those games bruised up and with injuries, and it's never pretty. Even Nebraska's win down there in Champaign last year, it was just kind of one of those games you had to grind out, and you never really feel comfortable pulling away. They don't let you do that. So I think that game on a Friday, the 400 sellout and everything that goes into that, to me, could be a really interesting one. Maybe that'll be a chance for Nebraska to end that drought against ranked teams going back to 2016. But I think that's the one, from what we've seen, Illinois has been a little bit more impressive.
Evan, to combine those last 2 questions, with what Nebraska has coming up in their schedule, obviously some bigger actual Big Ten tests coming, but also with Michigan, Oregon losing their luster just a little bit, what do you make of FanDuel having Nebraska 5th best odds to win the Big Ten championship game this year? Ohio State's in first, Oregon comes in at plus 280 in second, Penn State's at plus 420, third best odds, USC plus 850 in fourth, and then Nebraska and Michigan tied at plus 2,500.
Wouldn't it be interesting if Nebraska and Michigan played this year? How that one would go? I'd be really fascinated to see that game. But I think that's about right from what we've seen. That the top 4 teams that you mentioned there, to me, are the clear-cut top tier in the league still right now. And then you have that kind of upper middle class glut after that with Michigan. I'd still put Rutgers in that group. I think Illinois has entered the chat. We'll see about Indiana. I think that game against UCLA is going to be really interesting for both of those programs this weekend. I wish it was at a different time than when Nebraska's playing UNI this weekend, because I think that's going to be a really revealing game for both of those schools. But, I think that's appropriate for where Nebraska is. And it's an exciting time for fans because a lot of the off-season hope is now starting to be echoed or maybe validated by national folks. So it started with the AP ranking this week. It's now reflected in some of these betting lines that you're talking about. And these guys don't get caught up in the rule aid. They look at the numbers and it's all business for them. So I think it is indicative of the steps forward that Nebraska has taken, and it's also maybe indicative of the parity now in this super bigger 10 that's come about through NIL and the portal.
Evan, we'll check in next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Let's talk to a member of the 2024 Nebraska Football Hall of Fame class, Chris Kelsay, back with us. Chris, how we doing? Thanks for a couple of minutes.
No, you bet. Doing great. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Good to talk, and I know we talked before the season. We'll get to some of your thoughts through 2 games, but proud Nebraska guy that grew up in Auburn, and the announcement came out over the summer that you'd be in the Hall of Fame. Well, here comes Saturday night, man, under the lights. Are you excited?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it was exciting news. Obviously good news, and proud to represent a lot of good memories and great teams that I played on. And, it's a personal accolade, but there's a lot of people that made it happen. And I'm lucky enough to be rewarded with the Hall of Fame and be, recognized in that light. But there's a lot more than just myself deserving of that award.
Let's take a little trip back if we can. And I know your brother also, Chad Kelsay, in the Husker Football Hall of Fame. But who are some of those guys, aside from your brother, that A, either you came in with, or B, that also kind of helped lead the way when you did get here?
Well, I was fortunate enough. I committed early. I was actually Coach Osborne's last recruiting class. I committed right after my junior year in high school, and then unfortunately never had the opportunity to play for him. He retired during my senior year in high school. So I played under Frank Solich my entire career, which is, a great coach to play for as well. And I just wanted to give him a plug because of all the recent recognition that he's received, that it was well overdue in my opinion. And just a great guy, great coach, and well-deserving of everything he's receiving right now going into the College Football Hall of Fame and everything we've seen in the last couple of years, putting the light on his name and his career. So hats off to Coach Solich. But yeah, I mean, we don't have enough time to go through all the names and teammates that I had back then that played a role in it. But as I was saying, as soon as I graduated from high school, I moved up to Lincoln and moved in with my brother and his roommate, Steve Raymond, at the time, and got right to work. So I kind of felt like it put me a step ahead of my recruiting class anyway. The guys that committed to Nebraska were coming in my class because I had an extra couple months to just get acclimated. I knew a lot of the guys just from being around the program because of my brother. Chad was a senior when I was a freshman, and so we'd had 9 years there once I was done with one of the Kelsay boys in the program. So probably had a little easier transition than most. Chad led the way for me, and I hung around with a lot of the older guys, both on and off the field, whether it's workouts, lifting, conditioning, you name it. It is a close bond. You hear it all the time with former players and even current players. It's a fraternity of its own, and so I got a head start, like I said, and I think it really played dividends in my personal career. But and then just from a leadership aspect, watching those older guys who'd won national championships and put in the time and led those teams, just having some of that rub off on me early. I was a captain under Solich my senior year, and that's voted on by your peers. So apparently they saw it in me as well. But I have to credit, again, a lot of that because of my early upbringing through the program, whether it be my brother and the players, older players I have mentioned, or the coaching staff. Just being able to spend more time with them and knowing what they expect and just how they allow their players to kind of take hold of things and lead the program because they were doing it the right way. And that proved every day, every Saturday when we stepped on the field.
Chris Kelsay's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, part of the Nebraska Hall of Fame class 2024. And, Chris, you look at this Nebraska team through 2 games, and they just seem a little bit different, a little more sure of themselves. I'm not crowning them. I think there's some big ball games ahead, but you had to like what you see and got to take in Saturday night against that rival Colorado.
Yeah, it's always good to play well against them, but I'm a season ticket holder, so I took my son to the first game against UTEP. Was really pleased with the way we came out in the season opener, but last week was exciting. I mean, there's a lot of electricity in the stadium, and Natalie, my wife, and I enjoyed that together there live. And I tell you what, I'm super impressed with our defense and what Tony White's doing with those guys. I think that they are playing some of the best defensive football that we've seen in this program for a number of years, and I'm excited to see what they do the remainder of the year. But that place was as loud as I can remember it being since since back when we were playing, and that's exciting to see, just the atmosphere, the excitement behind the program. And again, I've said this numerous times in different interviews and on your show as well, and I just think Coach Rule is doing it the right way. He is a tremendous head coach. He's got a great staff around him, and from the day they stepped foot in Nebraska, it's just been a tireless effort to get us back on the map and get us back playing competitive football every time we step on the field. And, you can say what you want about the second half. We came out flat. Referees kind of slowed the game down with a lot of penalties, some of which were questionable. But when that first kickoff was kicked, I mean, it was lights out for Colorado. There's no doubt from the first play to the last that we were in total control of that ball game.
It's Chris Kelsay with us here. And Chris, one of the things I've mentioned on our show here over the past couple days is the fact that this Husker defense really plays like what I expect a black shirt defense to play like. And I want to draw on your years of experience. What to you defines a black shirt defense?
The way we came out. I mean, we just came out guns a-blazing, creating negative plays, creating havoc, and just having a little bit of that nasty to them. You see that, and we haven't seen it in a while. To say that I was proud as a former black shirt, and I think I can speak for all the black shirts in the past and present. I mean, it's just we like what we see, and we hope that continues. It's just a couple games, and like you said, we got a tough schedule ahead of us. We're going to be in some big games, and we're going to be in some dogfights, and that's when a true black shirt defense steps up. When your back's against the wall and you're facing really fortified opponent, and you're going blow for blow, who's the last man standing. And, we showed out on Saturday against Colorado, but in all honesty, we're going to play a lot better teams than what we played on Saturday. But you can only play the guys that they put on the schedule in front of you, and we did. And we showed out, like I said, and I couldn't be prouder at the time, and even right now looking back on it. I'm a huge Tony White fan, and he's got those boys rolling. We're playing it the right way. We're playing with that 11 man of the football, swarming defense, nasty mentality, hitting hard and doing our jobs and just flying around the football field having fun. You could tell those boys are having fun Saturday night. It was evident for everybody that was there and anybody that was watching it on the TV.
Chris Kelsay's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Chris, will get you out. I do want to ask about this moment that many Husker fans remember, and today is 9/11, and you were part of that team in 2001 that came out on that Thursday night against Rice when the first responders, fire department, police were the ones that came out of the tunnel walk. What do you remember about that moment, if you care to share or can share, and just that environment that night?
It was, it was surreal. There's a lot of emotions that go into that night. I remember when it happened, I had a really early business class that morning in Morrill Hall, basement of Morrill Hall, and I had a class following that, and I walked over to College of Business Administration in the big auditorium, and it was bare with the exception of a couple people, and then that's when I found out that the World Trade towers had been attacked, and so I went back over to South Stadium. South Stadium at the time was where football operations were running out of, and just watched the news like everybody else did, turned the TV on and just sat there in awe. But that night when football started back up, there's obviously a tribute prior to the game, and then afterwards it was, I don't want to say it was a sense of normalcy again by playing a football game, but it just puts everything into a grander scheme, a bigger picture perspective, and to know that we are blessed with the freedoms that we enjoy every day, and when that freedom is attacked or under siege, if you will, it's something that we don't experience obviously very often here in the United States. So I think it opened a lot of eyes and kind of proved to our country that we're a little more susceptible than what we thought at the time, for terrorist attacks and the like. So a lot of bad that takes place in this world, but there's a lot of good that comes from that bad. And I think we've grown, obviously, as a country. It's tough to say that now because you see how divided we are, from different political views and kind of the turmoil that we find ourselves in from time to time. But sometimes we just need to step back, take a big look at how lucky we are to live in this great country.
Husker Hall of Famer Chris Kelsay with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Chris, on that night, football meant a lot to a lot of people, not just in Nebraska, but really across the entire country. As we get you out, I want to get your thoughts. What does football, and more specifically Husker football, mean to you?
Besides my faith and my family and friends, football means the world to me. I mean, I guess it's all S, right? Faith, family, football, friends. It's done a lot for my family. It's done a lot for my brother. It's done a lot for me. It's tough, though. I coach high school football as well as youth football, and I have to remind my kids every once in a while that football is not who we are. It's what we do. But it can be a huge blessing if you do it the right way and you have the God-given abilities to do so. But it's been a huge blessing, one of the biggest blessings besides my faith and my family friends, like I said, that I could speak of because, since the time I was young, growing up in small town, southeast Nebraska, Auburn, it's always been sports and it's always been just faith and family. And I carried over to Lincoln, where I grew up wanting to play for. Had the opportunity to follow my brother up there to play for the red and the white and to live out a lifelong dream. And now to be recognized as a Hall of Famer for that great university and that great football tradition is humbling, is honoring, is just a dream come true, like I said. So I'm truly blessed. But again, I've always said, if you ever heard me speak, I'm a product of the people that I've been surrounded by, since my youth, since my family, and everybody that's played a role in it along the way, coaches and teammates. Academic advisors, teachers, you name it. There's so many more people that go into something like this that go unnoticed. And so I just feel a little bit of an obligation to give them the credit due to them and to allow them maybe a sense of excitement and celebration with me in this time.
Well, Chris, we'll see you Saturday. Congrats on the honor, and thanks for putting into some eloquent words with all we covered today. Appreciate your time as always.
Anytime, Chris. I appreciate you guys.
Good to hear from Chris Kelsay, Hall of Famer, 2024. Good on Kels and, of course, his brother. Both Kelsay boys in the Nebraska Football Hall of Fame. A Jock Doc on the way with Dr. Brandon. What's up with Christian McCaffrey?
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us. Dr. Brandon, how's week one in fantasy football treated you?
Oh, had a little bit rough there, my friend. Probably could have used a little bit more research on that one.
Well, you're not alone. It's okay.
I had a good first week.
You did? All right. Better than your Broncos?
Yeah.
Better than Elijah's Broncos. Yay or nay? How was your first fantasy week?
I have already dropped Bo Nix from my fantasy roster. That's how bad week one was for the Broncos.
Well, it says a lot that he was on your roster week one.
He was the last round pick. I was like, hey, maybe he balls out and everyone's going to want him on the waiver wire, but I'll have him. Nope, he's back to the waiver wire.
Well, Christian McCaffrey owners are, it's love or hate. Incredible player, good dude, tremendous talent. We know how good he's been with the Niners. We know how good he was in Carolina. And he's dealing with the old dreaded day-to-day, Dr. Brandon. They take on the Vikings Sunday. But you have kind of a two-part issue here. It's calf and Achilles. With McCaffrey, and right now the Achilles is tendonitis right now, inactive against the Jets. Jordan Mason went off. But wanted to get your take here with the timeline and specifically just dealing with tendonitis in the Achilles if you're a star running back.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. We always like to start off here with a little bit of anatomy lesson. So we've talked a lot about, it seems like we've talked a lot about gastroc or calf strains here lately and how that all connects, to the Achilles. As we review some of the anatomy on this, most folks who are listening probably know what the Achilles is. That's the thick tendon that attaches to the back of your heel or your calcaneus, comes up as a thick kind of cord, if you will, and attaches onto your calf muscles. There's two kind of main calf muscles that we're talking about when we refer to those structures. One is called the gastrocnemius. There's kind of two portions, medial and lateral. Gastroc heads, what we call it, and there's also a soleus. That's kind of the main two complexes involved with that. So it's kind of one main structure where you come up off the tendon that hooks on the bone, and then it kind of threads itself or weaves itself from tendon into muscle. We call that musculotendinous junction, and then it fully forms into kind of the muscle itself. And so, with Christian, it sounds like he started out on that, what we call the calf strain, gastroc strain side, so more kind of up in the muscular portion. And now he's kind of dealing more, we're starting to travel further down, we call it distally, further down towards the heel and down into the Achilles. And as we're listening to some of these reports, they're talking about some Achilles tendonitis. They haven't been super specific in terms of, is this more a strain like up in the muscular part? Is it kind of in that junction, musculotendinous junction portion, or is it all the tendonitis kind of down further near where that Achilles hooks onto the calcaneus? So that's kind of the structure where we are. Obviously, you can have points of inflammation anywhere along that spectrum, but now it sounds like he's really kind of dialed in on the Achilles tendonitis, and that's what's basically giving him the day-to-day stuff.
In terms of treatments, Dr. Brandon, what kind of options does Christian McCaffrey have? He had an injury to the Achilles with the tendonitis week 17 of last year. It sounds like it flared back up during camp, and it's been an issue ever since. What is he going to be doing in the meantime trying to rehab that?
Yeah, the key there is really backing off on some of the really explosive stuff. So you're going to pull him out of the weight room activities. A lot of the kind of box jump, plyometric stuff, you're going to pull that away. Biggest thing is kind of that in-season rest we always talk about. It's always hard to try to rest this in-season, but getting some relief from some of those kind of what we call eccentric elongation, where you're basically contracting and the tendon's also elongating at the same time, where the muscle's firing, tendon starts to stretch. Trying to avoid those activities, which is kind of that rocker step kind of move, which obviously as a running back, he does that a lot. And so you're talking some rest, definitely a lot of those kind of soft tissue modalities, whether it's the ultrasound, the autophoresis, anti-inflammatory modalities. And really the biggest key here, in addition to the rest portion, is the flexibility piece. So if he's nursing along one of those calf strains, things tend to get pretty tight up top in the gastroc, and remember that still hooks into the Achilles. Now you end up with a lot of stiffness, difficulties basically pulling that ankle up. That's kind of that Achilles mechanism, pulling it up is the stretch portion. So they tend to lose a lot of that, and the more of that you lose, then obviously there's more stress that transitions or translates through that area. And so that's really what they're working on. It's a stretch program mixed in with some rest and some anti-inflammatory modalities.
Dr. Brandon, is this something that needs to be fully taken care of from a health point of view before Christian McCaffrey can get back on the field, or is there anything that can be done? Say this starts taking you into the season too much for your liking and you want to get out there. Is there anything that can be done from a pain management point of view to get Christian McCaffrey back on the field?
Yeah, and so obviously you could think about some type of taping, some type of ankle immobilization device, whether it's an ankle brace, something just to kind of take out some of the forces that are translating across that ankle joint and through the Achilles. So bracing could be an option. Obviously, a number of touches in a game. There's not a lot of great stuff like in terms of injections. So this is definitely not an area you'd want to inject. That could cause a rupture, at least with like a steroid. So I wouldn't do that. You could consider doing like a PRP. That's where we take out your blood, spin it down, grab some of those platelet-derived growth factor and inject that into the area. But if you're utilizing that, you're probably going to want to have some rest on this for a couple weeks before you utilize that. And then the other thing would be, really dialing in on what the imaging looks like. So at his level, you definitely want to take a look at what does the Achilles itself look like. Is there an issue there with some tendon breakdown? If he has a pretty healthy-looking Achilles, and you're not seeing any significant tearing, more just inflammation, you can push these a little harder. But if you start to see some of that breakdown of the tendon, then you really have to pull back and be really more cautious.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Christian McCaffrey, our topic. We've hit on the Achilles. What part of the body torments the other? Is it the calf to the Achilles, or is it the Achilles to the calf? Because calf's been bothering him since August 6th.
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of a double-edged sword, if you will, because the calf stuff is easy to retweak, so the muscular portion, the calf strain portion, it's pretty easy to retweak that when you get back into the game and are playing and cutting. But then you move to the other side, it's more that kind of chronic flare-up, nagging, achy pain that comes from the Achilles. It's just always there, those sharp cuts, and then you get to the game and you're really kind of limping around, hobbling. You tend to, be able to push through it during the game most of the time, but then it really hurts kind of post-game. And then if you don't do a good job of resting it, getting your flexibility back, then you start to put extra force through a damaged tendon, and that can break it down. And then further you worry about, like, the tendon rupture would be kind of the biggest concern for him.
Dr. Brand, in terms of a timetable, what do you expect? When do you think we're going to see Christian McCaffrey back as a full go?
I think pretty soon. If you I'm trying to read through the lines here as I read that report, it doesn't sound like they're super worried about it. So hopefully just a little precaution here early in the season. Maybe he's just missed a 1 or 2 game kind of guy, comes back maybe for a half game. I think it'll be a pretty quick return for him would be my estimation, just kind of based on what they're saying. Ultimately, though, you look at what they're doing right now at running back, and maybe you park him for another month since their running back that they played Sunday actually did so well. You might get a little bit more time to rest.
They're pretty luxurious where what they draft and what they develop, and they can just hand it to Debo or the new guy or throw it to old George and just keep on rolling. Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Christian McCaffrey, our topic. Dr. Brandon, better luck this weekend in fantasy, and we'll holler next week.
Hey, sounds great, fellas. Y'all take care.
Appreciate you. There he is, Dr. Brandon. We'll wind down a Wednesday road show tomorrow at the Single Barrel 9th and P. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to all of you for checking us out in the stream, on the airwaves, and on Twitter with Hail Varsity Radio. You can get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. Let us know what you think of Hail Varsity Radio and Hail Varsity YouTube. Like and subscribe to both. Reminder about your friends at Big Brothers Big Sisters. They empower young people through one-on-one mentoring and unlock their full potential. Log on today to become a big brother or big sister or big couple. MentorOmaha.org. And Big Brothers and Big Sisters on a mission right now to recruit 60 men in 60 days. By October 30th, get involved today. And they're calling on folks in the Omaha metro area to step up, become a big brother for many youths. They've been waiting on a mentor for far too long. And they do a great job of pairing the little with the big. And that match specialist is going to take care of things. So all you need to do, step forward. Be part of the Big Brothers and Big Sisters 60 Men in 60 Days match by October 30th. And you meet twice a month, and pretty good activities, right? Grab some ice cream, go check out a ball game, shoot some hoops, play some video games.
Listen to Hail Varsity Radio?
That's fine if that's not mandatory. But
could be fun.
Be a mentor today. MentorOmaha.org with Big Brothers, Big Sisters in the metro. So we appreciate them. We appreciate you stepping forward. Part of that 60 Men in 60 Days challenge by October 30th. Your challenge tonight, Elijah, is no bowling tonight. Got a big road show Thursday at the Single Barrel. Tomorrow, 4 to 6. We're back at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill in Gretna. Friday, 4 to 6. Patio show 3.0. And then we're back at Single Barrel for pre- and post-game. Can't wait for it with Nebraska-Northern Iowa, 3:30 to 5:30. On Saturday. So take all that down. Come see us if you can. Appreciate you coming out. Your plans tonight are what? Are you going to fire the grill up? I did a couple of smoked pork chops. Watched volleyball. Unfortunately, turned volleyball off after the second set. Watched the debate. Wish I would have watched all of the volleyball after that bleep show last night. And the debate, that is. And yes. We're on to Thursday.
I've gotten the comment in that some people seem to think that I have a bed set up here in our KFOR studios because of how often I'm here. It's going to be another late night here. We are going to be recording another episode of the Average Joe Sports Show.
Yes.
A little bit later this evening. So I'll be here doing that once I get done with all the recording and the posting, which who knows how long that'll take me, probably late. Going to go home, hoping to do some meal prepping tonight, maybe watch another episode of Chasing 3. Should that drop tonight? So a pretty easy Wednesday night, I believe. Just talking some Husker football, doing some meal prep, and watching some Husker football, you know?
Okay.
Doesn't get better than that.
That works well. Black Hills Brennan wants to know, can we do a road show in Deadwood? I would love to do a road show in Deadwood.
One quick note here, just got the word in. We're going to be rescheduling our recording of the Average Joe Sports Show, so maybe tomorrow.
Okay, that's fine.
We'll see about that. So
yeah,
I'll be home. I will be meal prepping tonight.
Elijah, you can roll that cot back up, brother.
Well, there's a reason I keep a sleeping bag in my car at all times. You never know when you might need it. Say, sleeping at the studio.
Yeah, we get in Elijah's ride as we're tripping home from Boulder a year ago. I'm like, dude, you've got a sleeping bag and then you got that foamy pink thing.
The pad, the sleeping pad.
Yeah.
So anywhere can be a bed.
Get Elijah. It's all good. No, I don't want to go camping. All right, back tomorrow, 4 o'clock, with you on Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Thanks.